rewind a second. You could say that leads to the coin that ends up on Laura's grave. I mean, obviously, people saw the coin get sucked in, so they know something's going on.
Right. Something's
But you don't want to say that leads to the coin, and then you're going to see what happens next.
There is a wedding, and it might turn red. I'm not saying what's happening at this wedding.
If I said the words to you, moon door, what would that make you think of?
The little man flying?
Well, enjoy. There's your opening. Welcome back to Shat on TV, American Gods Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece for the hit Starz show American Gods. I'm one of your hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Dick Ebert, also known as Big D.
Good evening.
And Gene Lyons.
Worship me.
And this is our deep dive episode where we look at this week's episode of American Gods and share our insights, research, and opinions. We're actually recording this immediately after we watched it. What are your overall impressions of the show?
I'm impressed so far. It's a much more modern and upbeat than I expected. I think we've kind of been lulled into this cadence with first doing Westworld and then doing Taboo, where we're used to these shows that kind of achingly move forward until they finally start to catch a little bit of steam. This was right from the opening credits, very modern, very upbeat, a lot of action. It's just right in your face right off the bat. It explodes onto the screen.
I love that you say this is modern and upbeat. I'm coming into this as a virgin to the source material, the books. So watching this with very limited knowledge of the story. Visually, it's beautiful. You can see that the time was put into it. But it's going to take an episode or two for me really to get grounded and understand the world we're in. But for one episode, I thought it was compelling TV.
Yeah, I should clarify, but by the upbeat and modern part, I mean essentially that, if you look at the Westworld opening credits or the Taboo opening credits, you got this somber music and then it kind of builds up and everything. This is like a car commercial or maybe like a beer commercial from the get-go, right? There's like, look at this, now look at that. This music, and then the music is just like very, pumping, upbeat. It's just got a lot more energy to it than what we're used to watching.
Gene, I know you are very sensitive to music as it pertains to television shows and movies. What did you think of their song selections?
I felt with doing Where Did You Sleep Last Night was a really, really relevant and cool song that they used in it. And then their use of the Dixie Cups, Iko Iko, during the bar scene was fantastic. I'm a big fan of that song. It can't be played enough, so I thought that was really great. But, part of it is the saturation and the way things are shot. Everything's very stylish. Anytime anything like weird was going to happen or any sort of plot twist, you get that weird like droning music. Like in a lot of ways, this could be done poorly where a show is trying to force you into a feeling. But this was much more like, it was almost like just having a huge bowl full of candy and just gobbling it up. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we were worried about the production quality of Starz and were they going to be able to pull off something of this magnitude. I personally think they've accomplished it. After the first episode, I think it looks really good, really clean. They had the oversaturated, over-stylized lighting like you mentioned. It reminded me a lot of another Starz show that when you talk about the hyper-stylized violence, it reminded me a lot of Spartacus, Blood and Sand, which I think is a good approach that they're taking to, showing this type of violence because the book is pretty violent. There's things that happen. I mean, someone gets eaten by a vagina, right? But I think the approach that they took to it was the right one.
Canteen boy, do you like gladiator movies? So now we know that Raj likes Spartacus, Blood and Sand, which
right.
I've never watched an episode of, but
or 300, right? 300.
Okay,
I mean,
there we go.
You were mentioning that you were watching it with your girlfriend, and your girlfriend doesn't really like violent movies, or movies that have more of a grounded, violent approach, right? So, like, is it Rambo or John Rambo? Big D, where he pulls out the .40 caliber and they're just ripping apart bodies that are trying to get across the minefield. You have former military experience. That is legit reality of what .40 cal.
What are you even talking about? Hold on. You're mixing and matching scenes. You didn't know which movie.
If you
they might have been crossing a minefield. Hold on. I'll give you what you're thinking about.
Okay. What am I thinking?
If you want to go John Rambo and the violence where it becomes almost comical so you don't feel that pain is the probably bow and the arrow with the explosive tip, and they're kind of having a standoff, and the guy's out of bullets, and Rambo shoots him with the explosive tipped arrow, and he just blows apart like a meat piñata.
That's more ground-based reality depiction in media versus what we saw today with, a sword going in slow motion and someone's, upper torso being flown towards the screen and an arm with a sword going through another guy's neck. I mean, come on. That's the type of violence that we're talking about here. And I think that's more enjoyable for a show like American Gods.
I mean, they seriously must have hired 4 people to stand off screen and just have buckets of blood that they splashed in people's faces. At one point, there's like a disagreement between the 2 Viking guys. One guy gets punched in the face. He like loses a tooth. And I'm like, I don't want to hang out with these guys at all. This is terrible.
All right. Well, that's our overall impressions. For those of you who've never listened to Shat on TV, here's how the format for the show is going to go. We're going to talk in big overall ideas that I'll introduce here in a second. We're going to talk about them. We want to do this within about 60 minutes, and we're not going to go plot by plot. We're going to kind of talk all over the episode. If you have thoughts, ideas, analysis, if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, we want to hear from you. Our email address is hosts@shatontv.com. Please send us your thoughts, your ideas on the show. The topics that we've got for you tonight is we're going to first hear from Big D. We're going to hear from the book virgin perspective. So we're going to hear from him, get his questions, and then we're going to go into the extreme depictions like we talked about with the violence, discuss some of the inconsistencies with the book without spoiling too far of the story. We're also going to talk about Shadow Moon's dreams, and then overall character performances compared to what we thought or what we previewed with our wipe scale last week, and then that'll be the episode. We want to hear from you. Our email address again is host@shatontv.com, and follow us everywhere on social media. Subscribe to us. That being said, without further delay, the first topic, Big D, I got to hear from you. You are really taking on the audience who is coming fresh off the boat to this type of story. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to ask?
Well, first off, I sat down and I watched this with my wife and her sister who's visiting. They both said, what's it about? I didn't really know enough to explain it in a way that I thought would be accurate. So I just said, I'm really not sure. Let's just sit and watch it. And to that, I think the show really made a misstep. For someone coming in not knowing what to expect, I would have liked them to do a little more world building. Because they lost an opportunity. You're going to have a percentage of the audience, that is my wife, her sister, that is me, who's coming in, and without something really for the non-book readers to grab onto, to latch onto, to have a basic understanding of the world and what's going on. Yeah, it's cool to watch, but I don't know that people are going to come back.
So I think this could go 2 ways. Now, really, the way the book starts out, if you wanted to go talk about world building, is they build Shadow's world out first, right? So you learn about prison and you learn about him. And I think that Neil Gaiman was wise to do that because he's the foundation of the story, right? So you build him up and you get an understanding of him and his world, and then you branch out from there. What you don't want to do is start saying, okay, here are all the gods. Here's where they come from. Here's what they're all about, because the book isn't like that. And it's about revealing slowly how people emerge into the scene. And you're always wondering, is this a god? Is this a person? What's their, motivation? What's going on? Now, on the flip side, a lot of shows we watch, I think Westworld is a prime example. Viewers on Twitter and writing into us they ask these big questions. They're like, when is something going to happen? There's not enough action. Things aren't happening yet. And to me, I'm like, what are you talking about? A lot happened. A lot happened in world building. A lot happened in plot, but not a lot happened action wise. And I think that was what they were trying to do, was give you a scene right off the bat where something happened, because this show starts and within like 5 minutes, you got arrows going into guys. You got knives in people's eyeballs, punching teeth out. And I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah, but part of that problem is what you just said. As a virgin to the show, I don't know. I know the title is American Gods, but I don't know that gods are around, the everyday populace. I don't know that. So all I know is what I see. And when I start off with that 300 hyper realistic Viking bloodbath with ritual blindings and sacrifice, I don't know what I'm watching. And yeah, it's cool to watch, but I'm feeling like what's going on? And the whole time I felt like I was running downhill trying to keep up and just not fall.
I'm going to pull a page out of the Raj playbook. Let me ask you this. If the first time Mr. Wednesday is introduced on this show and you see, and he's got a scar or a fake eye, would that make a difference to you?
Something with his eye? Oh yeah. Well, yes. Now that you say that, if he had his eye, I would have immediately associated that with the Viking scene.
So that's the thing. So again, if we want to talk about a show like Westworld did an amazing job of piecing little, facts together, little hints. And so that whole scene setup, I thought the idea was they were going to give us some totems, basically, that we're looking for. The eye thing, the gallows. You see the gallows again in prison. And so you start putting it together that these things are all, there's a continuity there, right? And I think that's where the show kind of messed up, where they could have given you those bits so you go, oh, that's why that happened. Because, yeah, for the average viewer, if you watch that opening scene, you still have no idea what the fuck that has to do with anything else in the show.
In the book, there's chapters devoted to these type of stories that are being told. And what they're supposed to do is introduce the idea that these gods all come from stories from different people all across the world. These are all legends. If they're going to do opening scene of adapting a story like this, it's setting up the idea that this is not the same God, the same Christian God. This is, an old deity. And this is what we as humans did.
But again, we're talking now as a virgin to the book. All that is great, but to someone coming into the show, I don't know what it is. Am I watching something that is about religion? Am I watching something that's set in the past? Is this a story from the past? I really don't even know the reality that I'm in. I did, though, watch, after the episode, there was not a behind the scenes, but they were talking to, I think it was the executive producer, and they mentioned that they're going to start each episode with a coming to America, with that same formula that they did here, where we're going to see maybe all the different deities coming. But to me, I was afraid up until about halfway that I thought they were leaning too heavily on the visual style, and that I wasn't sure if the performances were going to be able to keep up with it. I mean, Ricky Whittle is good, but I was not blown away by him as the main protagonist. As soon as Ian McShane came on, I bought back in, I sat back up, and his performance, I think, did a great job of people who would have tuned out and changed the channel to saying, oh, okay, let's sit and watch this. It was compelling.
One of the things that's interesting, though, is they do take the time, and this is consistent with the book Big D, where they have these flashbacks, as Raj mentioned, and it literally does say at the beginning of the chapter, like, the time and where you are and what's going on. What's interesting, though, is that they didn't actually incorporate much that was factual or consistent with the god that they were referencing. So, for instance, with these Vikings and, Odin, presumably, he's the gallows god, right? And so you would think that there would be a hanging of some sort. So this whole war thing that they had on the beach and the eye stabbing and stuff, that's completely unnecessary, not consistent. So if a person were, again, like a Westworld fan, sitting there and trying to piece together who they are worshiping or what was going on there, it wouldn't make sense because it's not factual.
Yeah. And I want to say, I definitely agree, Gene, with your girlfriend, that the over-the-top way that they portrayed the violence definitely helped everybody kind of, in my viewing, stay involved in it. I now know after the fight in the bar that it's not meant to be realistic. It's tongue-in-cheek. It is an enjoyable play with violence. Even though it's a violent act, there's a little humor behind it, and it's not all malice. What now do the everyday, citizens of this world, what do they know about the gods? What do they think is going on? Are they aware that gods walk among them, theoretically?
Yeah. So again, this isn't the Marvel universe where people know there's superheroes running around. This is essentially, you're not supposed to know their gods. They don't know their gods. I mean, it's supposed to be the real world, right? And so in that sense, they should have no knowledge that these gods are even around.
They know their gods. They know their gods.
Well, the gods know their gods.
Yeah,
yes.
The gods know their gods. I'm just saying, the people don't know that they're gods. They don't know why they're compelled to do something that Mr. Wednesday tells them to do. They don't know why they just do it.
Right.
So when presumably miracles happen or things that are not of the natural realm, people just chalk it up to what?
So think about the stories that were told, if you hang a man, or you cut your eye out, or you go to war, one of these gods that you're worshiping in exchange for that will then give you wind to sail back to the new world. So all those stories that were written down and told, what if they were true? What if they weren't just stories? What if all that shit actually happened?
And there's an important moment there when they leave and they leave that the effigy of Odin on the beach there. And in bringing those gods with them, essentially they stranded those gods on this continent, and until, essentially, as the show says, when Leif came back to the Americas, his god was waiting for him already there, so that's the idea.
This story is about immigrants. And you think of the idea of what the promise of America is that you can come from any walk of the world, any societal class, and you have opportunity here. Well, what do immigrants bring with them? They bring with their set of beliefs, their culture, their way of life, and embedded in that is religion, their legends they grew up with, the stories that are told. So when you think of American gods, unlike any other country in the world, the promise of America brings with it all these different religions, all these different types of gods.
And one thing I have to say, I understand that, for the longest time, there's been an attempt to kind of bring this book to life. And this first episode has made me really glad that they waited. This is something that a few years ago was only a major movie studio. As much as I'm uneasy and kind of not sure of my footing, I can bet I'll look back in about 2 weeks and be like, damn, that first episode was great. I get it now. I see where we're going. So I'm excited for the season.
What they do here, too, with the visuals, which I find fascinating, is that Neil Gaiman writes graphic novels, comic books. This was actually a novel with no illustrations whatsoever, and yet the style is so consistent with a comic book style. I feel while watching it like I've almost seen these pages before. They did a wonderful job of that, and I agree that they would not be able to have done this in the past. In addition, what they do with the amount of investment they put into this, how many scenes did you have in this show that would have been spread out, that could have really qualified as the finale for other shows, right? You had the Bilquist scene, you had the Viking scene, you had the hanging scene with Technical Boy. You had that great fight scene with Matt Sweeney. I think, Raj, I'm going to leave you to talk about that one. I could feel your boner from over here.
Oh my
while
God,
that
it
scene
was
was
so
happening.
big. I had a leprechaun boner. No, that's a perfect way, I think, to describe the visuals, right? Is graphic novel.
Also, let's not forget the greatest credit that we can give them is they resisted the urge to put Dropkick Murphys into this scene.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, American Gods. I wanted to ask you, Big D. You said you watched this with your wife, and you said was it your wife and one other woman?
And her sister visiting from Brazil.
All right, so let's talk about this. Is a perfect opportunity to talk about that Bilquist scene.
Yeah.
What was their reaction to that?
I said, "What the fuck are we watching here?" Because I said, "Is he getting smaller? Is she putting him aside?" And as you could see that the gentleman was really enjoying it, and she finally gets all the way in. My sister-in-law looks over and she goes, "I got to try that move next time." They thought it was actually kind of funny, but it was bizarre. We didn't know what to make of it because he's chanting his allegiance to her, and he's kind of forsaking every other god, and he's accepting her, and it was a beautiful scene to watch. I just thought he was almost disappearing. I didn't think she was actually inserting him. That was an interesting end to the scene.
So when I heard that they were doing a TV show of this, one of the first things I thought is, how are they going to pull this scene off? And I honestly thought they would find some workaround, that they would flash to the next day or something like that, or you just see the guy like sizzle and fry or something. The fact that they took the gamble, that they went ahead and did the insertion and the envelopment, and also the fact that in the book they describe how Bilquist afterwards stretches out on the bed like a cat, and then you see that rejuvenation, right? You're seeing the purpose for it. I thought all that was really well done.
I questioned that. I said to my wife and her sister, I said, "Is she younger now?" I said, "Did this somehow recharge her batteries?" And we felt that, but we weren't really, it wasn't definitively stated. So I'm glad to hear you say that was the intention of it.
Knowing that you just saw a rejuvenated god after someone worshipped them, what does that make you think?
Well, it was obvious that she said, "I'm not what I used to be," so she's probably fallen out of favor, but it was interesting just to see how she was living her life and how she was surviving.
There's a really key speech in addition with Mr. Wednesday says, and I don't think it's even out of the book, but they made it a point in the show, which again kind of sped along the progress of your understanding, which is he talks about the airplane and how it stays aloft. And it was modified. The scene was modified, but essentially it's again speaking to that the belief, the faith is really what keeps it aloft. And so that is they're reinforcing very gently. I thought it was a really brilliant way throughout the show to kind of get people keyed into what's going on.
When you talk about the over-stylization from a visual perspective, I think there's also kind of a hyper-realization from a language in a good way, not quite the George Lucas way.
In this scene, it really works. In the Bilquis scene, now in the book, he's a Hollywood producer. The guy is normally talking like a normal guy. He's got a cell phone. He's just kind of chatting her up like she's like a slut, like a prostitute. And then as he begins coitus, the language changes and he goes into these ancient rituals, this chant of, I worship your breast and I worship your thigh. And in the book, it's even more obviously religious in that sense. Aside from that, there are scenes like when Shadow Moon is talking to his wife Laura on the phone, where when you hear Neil Gaiman's writing come out of other people's mouths, you realize how clunky it can be sometimes. I'd never noticed that before.
We talked about one of the things that sounds clunky to both of us, the wife's use of the word puppy. I hate that. Listen, does your girlfriend or your wife have any kind of pet name for you?
I've pretty much my entire life stayed away from terms of endearment. I don't even like babe. Babe really weirds me out. And so I know you are a big fan of lover, which I also I'm not into at all. I just prefer just Gene is nice. What bothered me about this, I felt it was absolutely wrong because what it does is it changes the entire nature of her character and her situation. So if you think about, Bilquis as a goddess, as the Queen of Sheba, who has been reduced to being a Hollywood prostitute, it makes her situation a little more sad, right? That she needs to turn to men to worship her in this way. And in the book, she actually gets a cash payment, which is again like a token of worship. It makes her seem far more predatory than she is. Like you felt bad for the guy in a way that, I mean, he died happy, sure, but at the same time, he didn't do anything wrong. He was just trying to meet somebody, and he was very nice to her the whole time. Whereas in the book, the guy is not a very nice guy, and so you don't feel so bad.
Tinder's dangerous. Kids, be very careful.
I like the idea of kind of a guy who's kind of a schlub using dating in, kind of modern world. But were there other inconsistencies with the book that you thought maybe didn't do as good of a job?
Again, I mentioned before with the Viking scene at the beginning that Odin is the gallows god. No gallows were shown. We had everything short of gallows. We had fire, knives, and stabbings, and all sorts of other stuff. Mr. Wednesday, again, I mentioned the eye thing. Neil Gaiman makes several references to his false eye, and that he's got scarring and stuff like that. Again, pretty key after the eye sacrifice scene, kind of left it out. One of the things that really blew my mind about the whole thing was when he brings over the mead, and it's in shot glasses. And then another one that I think we should get into as far as inconsistencies go, and I know this is a character that you were a big fan of and a performance you're a big fan of, was Technical Boy. I felt the Technical Boy scene, in the book, it's more, I guess, realistic in that they roll up in a car as opposed to like some mystery box. And I felt it was unnecessarily showy. It was a little too Lawnmower Man for me. But I thought they did a great job capturing the overall essence of the character.
Yeah, Big D, what was your take on Technical Boy?
Again, I don't even know his name was Technical Boy, other than you saying that. But I did get the vibe that it was some form of VR headset that had just latched onto him like a face hugger from Aliens.
I think that they kind of nailed this versus what we talked about, possibly wanting more of a Jonah Hill type character.
Yeah, I felt like it looked more like some sort of a crossover between Jesse Eisenberg and Lady Gaga, but I mean, whatever, it worked. He was menacing, he was schizophrenic, impulsive, all the things that we would associate again with the character representing technology in this day and age. I thought it worked pretty well.
Because there's nothing more douchey than a technical guy fucking just vaping. It was dried toad skin that he's smoking.
No, it was synthetic toad skin.
Isn't there a drug? They go and they search for the frogs in Mexico and they grind it up into powder and they smoke it.
Well, it's like the toad licking thing. It's
toad licking, right? So yeah, this is totally like almost like a scene out of like Alice in Wonderland, right? With the whole caterpillar and smoking and blowing.
It's a hallucinogen. It's meant to extract the confession out of Shadow Moon. I thought it worked all right. The one thing I had an issue with, though, was, again, you have to be very careful. You can take liberties with certain actions, but when you talk about gross violence or the attempt to kill somebody, it really changes the nature of a relationship between two characters. And so they added in this scene where Technical Boy's goons, the children, hang Shadow Moon from a tree, and then they explode into like a blood mist, and there's blood everywhere, and it looks pretty cool, but the big question is this okay to do? Because, again, for the book purists, this doesn't happen in the book. They beat him up and they leave him on the side of the road.
Did that take place in the real world, or was that still in the virtual world?
doesn't matter. It wasn't in the book at all. I mean, what the hell was the point of that? No, I mean, I think it's pretty clear what's going on with that. It's an allusion to the gallows god, to Odin, and the fact that there's a symmetry there. I get what they were doing with it. It was just the fact that you now associate Technical Boy with trying to kill Shadow Moon, which he does not do in the book. Therefore, it feels, I don't know, it just feels like they're making him to be too much of a villain in this point of the book.
Don't take it in the wrong way. What old Raj is going to say here, but this is a type of show where things like the hanging could mean something. So take that for what you will from your old buddy Raj, so that when you look back after episode 8 and you go back to episode 1, you're like, oh, it all makes sense right now.
Anyway, think we cut the whole hanging thing.
All right. The other inconsistency that I want to talk about is the friend's wife. In the book, she kind of explains the whole affair that happens, but this is there's a lot of liberties that are taken with the scene. Gene, you did not like this whatsoever.
No. First of all, Big D and I talked about this. The performance done portraying Audrey is just awful. This is the low point in the episode. We're going to talk a little bit later about different performances. This one for me did not ring true. She's supposed to be a grieving wife who's been betrayed. She's on anti-anxiety pills. She's on a ton of Ativan. She said she lost count of how many she does. Then she comes out and delivers a monologue, sexually propositions Shadow Moon, which is not consistent with the character, and it makes her seem way worse than she is. In the book, she instead spits in Laura's face, which I think is a believable reaction. Not trying to blow a guy on a woman's grave.
Now, I'm not even going to talk about what the character's motivations were, because I could see someone reacting this way. It doesn't make it right. My problem was the actress. Her portrayal of the role was plastic. It was unbelievable. Her face, my wife said, what's up with her face? Like, she was not able to emote. So if that wasn't on the written page, it was a poor performance. It could have been just cut. It wasn't important. We got the fact. We know what was going on, but get a better actress.
But so in the book, she's at the funeral and she makes a huge scene. She goes up and she spits on the face of Shadow Moon's wife, and she kind of has this whole kind of blow up, and then shows up in a car and kind of monologues basically the entire affair and kind of lays out what Shadow Moon's wife has been doing while Shadow Moon was in prison. In this, I think I kind of like this scene, of kind of I'm going to, keep my composure in the wake, but then at the graveyard, I'm going to try, I'm high on Ativan, which I don't know what Ativan is. What is Ativan?
Anti-anxiety drug.
Okay, so I'm high on that, and I'm going to do what the other person did to me, and then that'll make me feel better. I kind of believe that more than going up and spitting in the face of a dead person. So I kind of like this scene, and I thought the actress did a fine job.
You also liked Home Alone.
I did. I like Home Alone. Macaulay Culkin's great. So those are the big inconsistencies that we found out with between the TV show and the book. If there's any ones that we've missed, please write us. Our email address is hosts@shatontv.com. The next topic I want to talk about is Shadow Moon's dreams. We kind of see him in the prison, and he sees his wife up on the ceiling. We see him enter into a bone orchard, which is also the title of the show, and we see at one point a buffalo. What was your impression of that, Big D, as a first time viewer? What do you think the meaning is behind the bone orchard?
I just thought it was some vivid hallucination. If I saw on a written page that it was a buffalo with flaming eyes.
Yeah, I thought the buffalo looked good. It's supposed to be a buffalo man, but it was. But again, I think that it looked pretty good. I also thought they probably didn't want to go Buffalo Man because they didn't want to look like they're ripping off American Horror Story, so whatever, or have it be confused for a Minotaur, which would be disastrous. So I thought it looked really cool too. And a lot of this CGI that they used, it doesn't look quite realistic, but that's okay because these are dream sequences, and dream sequences look weird. So I thought it looked all right. Again, the question though, and I think Raj agrees with this, is for the viewer, especially somebody who hasn't read the book, do any of these scenes make sense?
Right.
Do they help at all, or is it wasting minutes?
Well, my question is this. What are we going to do as far as format going forward? Percentage of the audience has read the books. The other percentage is like I am. I think going forward, just a suggestion, that we would treat what is on screen as all we know. If I'm a listener to the podcast right now and I've not read the book, I'm going to be like, fuck, I'm not going to listen to these clowns. I don't give a shit what the book says. I'm watching the TV show. I don't want half of my podcast to be the differences between the book and the show. I'm not going to read it.
I guess the question still stands though, do these dream sequences help your understanding of this world? Like, I'm asking you because
Okay.
I'm tainted because I know what's going on. I'm saying
Okay, so-
in watching those scenes, does that help at all?
No, I don't think it helps because we don't know within what context it is. Game of Thrones, you have Bran's visions of the weirwood tree. You have an idea of what it is. Here, there's some similar tree with Scratch's face. There's the flaming-eyed buffalo. I don't know what it all means. I think as a casual viewer, you don't know. Is this just a vivid, nightmarish, terror-filled dream, or is this actually something else? We don't know. And I don't think it explains anything to us. It just adds more questions. It's obvious that the only way I'm going to know about even if you do your research, you're going to tell me, spoiler, something that's coming down the road.
Yeah, but don't you think people who search that out are also people who listen to podcasts? They want.
I think that there's a percentage of it who have read the books. Look at the comics. Walking Dead's one of the most popular on TV. There's like 4% of their reading audience as to what watches it.
Aside from the book, if you're talking about buffalo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo is a totem. It means something. It's a representation of land. So it's completely outside of the book. But, same thing as if I see a lightning storm, I'm like, okay, well, that's probably Odin. Like, duh. Or Thor. Like, so it's a hard one to piece out because I guess it's what we have to do is essentially go, okay, if somebody's asking why does a buffalo show up in this scene? Well, the answer is all the dreams are symbolic. Buffalo typically is a symbol of the land.
That's why I'm turning to a podcast like this, because I want to understand that what the buffalo is a representation of, why there are dead skulls there, why he smelt something, basically had hyper awareness that another god, that Odin was coming. Like, you want to hear that.
Okay.
You could say that without, well, in the book, it's this, right? Am I wrong?
Agree. I agree. It's totally different then.
Okay. All right.
Well, one of the things the dream sequences led me to understand, and Raj had asked me this before we started watching the show, is, do you recommend people read this first or go into it fresh? And I found myself almost wishing I hadn't read the books, only because of the fact that I wish I could piece this mystery together along with everybody. Because to me, all the symbolism now is quite obvious, having read the book, and to other people who've read the book, it'd be the same. It would be fun to be along this adventure with everyone else trying to piece this together, because Neil Gaiman was pretty blatant with the symbolism, and the show is staying faithful to that, where when you see certain characters, they're not hiding very much exactly who they are. And in the case of the buffalo, it stands true to the typical representation of the buffalo being a symbol of the land. And so if a buffalo is talking to you, the land is talking to you, and the buffalo says to Shadow Moon, believe. So it's like, it's pretty clear what's going on symbolically.
What did the dead tree and the dead bodies mean, though?
I took it as there had been many before Shadow Moon there who possibly had failed at whatever their mission or goal was, that he wasn't the first, adventurer there or the first to actually have this opportunity, whether that's as Mr. Wednesday's assistant or as a larger player in a global theme.
Well, the last topic I wanted to discuss is the character performances. We discussed in our last episode, in our preview episode, we went through all the different characters and the actors playing them. We gave our wipe scale. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that. Big D, you weren't on that episode, but did anything change for you? That's kind of what I wanted to discuss lastly before we close up shop and get ready for your emails and response to those. The first one I want to talk about is Mr. Wednesday. Now, this was a 0 wipe score, both by myself and Gene. Big D, Gene, anything changed from you from watching Ian McShane's performance?
No, I told you, the show turned around for me once he came on screen. Compelling, charismatic. I don't know necessarily who he is yet, but every time he's on screen, I have to pay attention.
Raj, I am 100% on board with him. He is the standout performance in this. I thought there were some other strong performances, but he can really carry the show, and I think he did a fantastic job in the debut. He had a lot of screen time too, and that was a long scene on the plane with nothing to work with other than two guys in chairs,
Yeah, the next character is Shadow Moon. I gave this a 3 wipe. I was, on the fence. I could go either way. I thought Ricky Whittle did a fantastic job. I think he did a fine job. Enough for me to move the wipe scale from like a 3 to like a 2. What did you guys think?
Obviously a good-looking guy. He's a physical specimen. He can easily pull off the bodyguard, the physical fighting, but I don't know necessarily the emotionally connect to him as an actor. I don't know that he can carry the role, but there's still room to grow.
I think when I was watching Ricky Whittle play Shadow Moon, I could tell that there was a man acting out a role on television. And that's the defining line, right? Is when you lose yourself, you forget that this is an actor, you believe he actually is the character. He didn't cross that line. So to me, I'd actually downgrade his performance from what I expected from Ricky Whittle. Again, not a show killer. Honestly, Shadow is not critical, even though he is, the story is told through his eyes. His performances, his charisma is not critical to the show. It's the way he interacts. As you said before, Raj, he's the straight man in this.
Now, one of the interesting things that was just tweeted out is that he was chosen out of 1,200 different actors that auditioned for this role and had to send audition tape 16 times. So, I mean, there was a lot of Shadow Moons that they went through to get to Ricky Whittle. And I think he packed on like 20 or 30 pounds of muscle for this role. So he obviously is invested in this. And I think his performances will get better, even just a little bit better for a protagonist of this kind of story, would again make this better. The next character is Bill Quist. I think Yetiti did a fantastic job. I thought the scene was sexy. I thought it was well executed. I believe that she was the Sheba. I loved her performance, even though it was, only in one scene for a limited screen time.
Oh, totally agree. Even though this is a scene where a woman is swallowing an entire man with her vagina, I still would question, maybe I'd go back with her. She really made it seem something attractive. She emoted this, I can't even put it into words. Besides just being, she's visually beautiful and she's an attractive woman. Her character, there's a depth to it. And it's somebody that I want to see more of, and I want to learn her backstory, because she makes a comment that she says, "I'm not what I used to be." If this is a shadow of her previous self, I'm eager to see what she was like at full strength.
She did a wonderful job of pulling off all the key character components. So she needs to be somewhat, she needs to be confident at the peak of her powers, also needs to have a vulnerability when she's not at the peak of her powers. She needs to be sexy, yet somewhat fearsome. I mean, every part of this character she nailed. This is an outstanding performance. And I can just imagine as an actress seeing this on paper and seeing what you've got to do and then preparing yourself and executing on that. This is a really stellar job by Yetiti.
We sang the praises of all the actresses and actors on Westworld when they were naked and they were having to give powerful performances in front of clothed actors, immortal legends like Anthony Hopkins. And so I think she does a great job almost in that same Westworld.
Also, she puts on a clinic on how to ride cowgirl. That is, that was instructional, at least.
Isn't that an AVN category?
It might be.
Yeah, Yetiti Badake's cowgirl workout.
The next character is the tall leprechaun. Gene, you were a little suspect on this when you gave your rating last week.
Dude, all apologies to Pablo Schreiber. You killed it on this. Look, I am so sick of the trope, hard-fighting, Irish bar, beer guzzling guy, it's such a cliche, and then making it a leprechaun that's tall, everything about this I hated. He nailed it. He was likable, yet kind of annoying. He was tough, yet at the same time goofy. Even the magic tricks when he was just circling around doing the coin tricks for Shadow. Mad Sweeney was a absolute joy to see on the screen. I thought that scene was fantastic. And I love, again, a bar scene that harkens back to the classic bar scenes where there's, shit breaking everywhere and just big haymaker punches being thrown. I thought it was great.
Another reason to be glad they didn't make this 5 or 10 years ago was not having to see Michael Rappaport play this role. He pulls it off in a way that you're supposed to be annoyed by what he's doing. And his coin trick is over the top. But still at the end, you like him. And I wished he was in the car, because that would have been a hell of a way to wake up for Shadow after you got your ass kicked.
Yeah.
And the dude's in the car with you and you can kind of laugh it off. So I'm eager to see where he goes from there. But funny dude, executed very well.
Yeah, Schreiber nails this. We already talked about Technical Boy, so the last character I want to talk about is a character that we didn't preview last week, which is Low-Key Lysmith, who is Shadow Moon's, is it roommate? Is your cellmate. He's your cellmate. I'm sorry.
I thought he did a pretty good job. I actually really liked this performance. I thought that the scene where they're putting together the birdhouses and they're going over that advice, which is still ringing in Shadow's ears as he's in the airport about, don't fuck with the, I don't know what, they changed it from the book. The book was like, don't piss off the airport people. people or something. They changed like don't fuck with the bitch at the airport or something. But anyway, point. Now I know Big D, not a big fan of this performance. I thought it was pretty great.
And again, I'm hoping that you're saying that there's more to the character and that it will explain his tics and just the way. I don't like his vocalization. I don't like the way that he speaks the dialogue. He just annoys me, and I don't know what it is.
Well, he's got that shitty facial hair. He's got the do-rag thing going on. He kind of talks out of the side of his mouth. I get it. It's weird, but I think that those quirks are, again, intended to entertain and to tip you off that he's not your average inmate.
I'm excited to see more of them. Now, this is our first book to screen adaptation that we've done. We even though we watched Westworld, the movie, the TV show was such a radical departure from that. Knowing that two out of the three of us have listened or read the source material, how should we approach the show format moving forward?
I mean, I think it'd be helpful to hear from the listeners themselves as to what's useful, what helps you appreciate the show. I think in talking about it, I'm glad that we brought up the inconsistencies and consistencies with the book, but that might get a bit tiresome for people to hear about that. Also, we always run the risk of spoilers that we may not intend to produce. So to me, it seems like if we stick to what's on the screen with maybe a few insights, largely we can use our knowledge more to answer questions if they're asked. That might be a good way to do it, but I'd really like to hear what listeners have to say about it. So again, if you could write in at host@shatthemovies.com. I'm sorry. So you can write in at host@shatontv.com or just hit us up on social media and kind of let us know what you think about this opening episode, what was helpful, what wasn't helpful, and give us a little bit of direction here.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. This is a divergence from what we've traditionally done. We're eager to hear what you say, and I think as much of it's a challenge. This is probably the most challenging recording that we've done in the last 2 months. You're trying to walk that tightrope where I'm arguing for the viewer, non-book reader. You two are going for the book reader / TV. We got to walk that line, and I think we'll only find that with your feedback to what works best for most of our fans and fans of the show.
Yeah, I think ultimately we don't want to give away spoilers, right? We don't want to ruin your experience. Maybe if there's a section for spoilers, if that's something you guys want, let us know. But the last thing we want to do is have you unsubscribe and not listen to us. So whatever you're interested in, you want, please let us know. Again, hosts at Shat on TV. The other thing that you can do is you can go to our website and you can actually sign up for a Shat Out. Now, what is a Shat Out, Gene?
Shat Outs are a little way of showing your support for the show without having to write an entire email to us. If you just want to get your name on there, let us know that you're listening. We do Shat Outs. You can go to the website, shatontv.com, scroll down on the main page, and you'll see a little pop-up or a little slide out that says, get your Shat Out sign up here. Put your name in there, and we will read your name on the air to let people know that you are a listener. And to show our appreciation for your support. This week, I believe we have 10 shout-outs. They come from Regine, Mark, Melody, Maury, Tanya, Sharon, Lori, Lana at Mugshot Collection, Noah and Betty Foss, and just Gene. Not Gene Lyons, just Gene. So those are the shout-outs. Thank you so much for writing in. Again, go to shatontv.com. And you can get your shout-out read on the air on the next episode of American Gods.
Well, that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV, American Gods Edition. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Our handle is at Shat on TV. We're also on Facebook. Like us there. Just search for Shat on TV Podcast. Our website, once again, is shatontv.com. Our email address, we need your feedback, host at shatontv.com. We're everywhere. Fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by any of those, be sure to leave a 5-star review and share with a friend. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for our episode 2, American Gods Deep Dive. Thanks so much for listening. Good night, and hail the old gods.